It's the 5th year since I'd been taking care of my blind boyfriend, and suddenly he regained his eyesight. Everyone thought that the first thing he would do after regaining his sight would be to marry me. But the moment he saw my face clearly, he quietly put the diamond ring he had already prepared back into his pocket. I smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "I understand." On the day I moved out of Julian's house, Julian still maintained his dignity. He calmly handed me a check for 10 million and said, "Victoria, I've always regarded you as my sister. If you're not happy, you can come back to the Julian family at any time." I didn't answer. Instead, I threw the ill-fitting ring into the trash can right in front of Julian. Only the always unruly billionaire of the Julian family remained sitting on the chair, lost in a daze. The moment the gauze was removed, everyone held their breath. The corners of Julian's mouth turned up, and the excitement on his face was hard to hide. He couldn't wait to ask his friend, "Where's Victoria?" My heart warmed. I never expected that the first thing Julian would do after regaining his sight was to look for me. Finally, he saw me beside the hospital bed, crying tears of joy. Although I got to know him only after he went blind. But after 5 years of careful care and companionship, everyone, including myself, thought that Julian would be able to recognize me at a glance. Julian's gaze swept across my face, and his expression froze instantly. Even the ring box in his hand was quietly tucked behind his back. "Don't kid me. How could you be Victoria?" The moment Julian said these words, everyone inevitably fell silent. Sensing that the situation was not right, one of his friends quickly pulled me in front of Julian, trying to find an excuse for his words. He was also trying his best to protect my dignity that was about to be shattered. I forced a bitter smile and said, "Are you still going to propose to me?" These words made Julian stiffen, and his fingers unconsciously rubbed his newly sighted eyes. An oppressive silence filled the hospital room. After a long while, he said softly, "I'm sorry. I've always regarded you as my sister." In the end, I stood up and, as usual, helped him organize the daily necessities beside the hospital bed. I tactfully changed the subject and asked, "Do you want some water?" This finally broke the awkward atmosphere. His tense body slowly relaxed, and I habitually asked, "Do you need me to massage your temples?" He shook his head and said softly, "No need. Your massage technique is much more professional than that of a nurse." I stared blankly at my hands as I tittied up the bedside table. I remembered that at first, I didn't know how to take care of a patient at all. He couldn't accept the care of a strange nurse. Every time a nurse came, he would irritably drive them away. But a blind person needs professional daily care. So I took a 6-month rehabilitation nursing course. I started by practicing on myself, and later I carefully took care of his daily life. The first time, I only dared to massage him while he was asleep. He had a very light sleep and was still awakened. He roared furiously, "Get out of here." I didn't leave. I continued to gently massage the acupuncture points as taught by the teacher. Although he couldn't see, he swept everything on the bedside table to the floor. I still remained unmoved, and he simply threw out all the items within his reach. In the end, what he smashed out was that beautifully framed picture, freezing the moment when he stood high-spirited at the company's listing signing ceremony. When his forehead was broken and bleeding, he heard the sound and tried to get up to check, but because he couldn't see, he could only sit on the bed helplessly. Finally, he covered his face and broke down in tears. "Just leave me alone. There's no hope. I can't see anything. I'll never be able to see again in my life." At that time, he was completely desperate about life, and I insisted on staying by his side every day. Until his mother found him cutting his wrists in the bathroom and quickly sent him to the hospital. His mother was at a loss. I squatted in front of the hospital bed and said, "Look in my direction." He turned blankly towards the direction of my voice, and I said, "Everything will be okay. Trust me." At that time I wasn't even sure if I could wait for this day to come. From then on, I moved into his apartment. Julian's mother held my hand with tears in her eyes and said that it was all thanks to me for these years. I knew exactly what she wanted to say but didn't. I said softly, "As long as Julian doesn't drive me away, I'll stay with him." But in fact, even if he did drive me away, I wouldn't leave. When I took him to see a psychiatrist again and it was fruitless, he broke down and said, "Get out of here. All of you, get out." By then he could already sit on the sofa by himself, and the entire living room was in a mess from what he had smashed. Fortunately though, he had learned to avoid me and no longer threw things at me. After he finished venting, I walked up to him and said again, "Julian, trust me." I've said this sentence for a full 5 years. Gradually, he began to accept treatment, and his optic nerve gradually showed a reaction. Finally, he could distinguish light and shadow. Until yesterday, when the surgery was completed, the attending doctor was amazed and said that the surgical effect exceeded expectations. If there were no accidents, he would be able to regain his sight. When Julian's mother learned this news, she immediately stuffed a bank card into my hand. I stared blankly at the card. In these 5 years, I had never thought of asking for any reward. His friends all called me their future sister-in-law, but only I knew that I wasn't even considered his girlfriend. We had never even had a formal confession, let alone established a relationship. But I always remembered what Julian said. "Victoria, when I can see again, we'll get married." That was after his first treatment when the doctor euphemistically said that the hope was slim. I helped him home. As soon as we entered the door, he lost control of his emotions. The once high-spirited financial elite had fallen into the endless darkness, and no one could accept it easily. I hugged him tightly, and he bit my shoulder hard. That bite was so hard that there's still a scar on my shoulder. The moment he touched the blood, he came to his senses and said in a panic, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." After apologizing, I massaged his temples as usual. Suddenly, he said that sentence. No, before that. He also asked, "Victoria, do you have feelings for me?" I didn't dodge and looked straight at him and said, "Yes." He was silent for a long time before saying that he wanted to marry me. But I didn't do all these things in exchange for something. I just hoped that one day he would love me as much as I loved him. At this moment, I habitually stood up, ready to massage him. I knew he was looking at me. After a long time, he spoke. "Victoria, you don't have to do these things anymore." My hand froze, but I still insisted on finishing the massage. I looked up and asked again, unwilling to give up, "Julian, do you still want to marry me?" He hesitated to speak and finally said nothing. I could only laugh at myself for being too naive. That this ring was put on my finger by him personally. After hiding my feelings in my heart for so long, how could I not have any illusions? I stood up and went to the bathroom to wash the medicine off my hands. The ring on my ring finger seemed to be burning my skin. He said outside the door, "Victoria, I regard you as my own sister." Tears dropped into the sink, and I quickly wiped them away. Please don't say such things. Such words are too cruel to me. When I walked out of the bathroom, the living room was still lively. I looked down into Julian's eyes and took off the ring with difficulty. In fact, it didn't fit. It was a size too big. I didn't know if it was his oversight or if it wasn't meant for me at all. But I always lied to myself that all rings were like this, and I had to wrap it with several layers of medical tape to keep it in place. When I really took it off, the marks left by the tape were still there. And I even regretted not taking it off earlier. Julian avoided my gaze. I placed the ring in the palm of his hand. "Here, take this back." Looking at the marks of the tape on my finger, I added, "It's a size too big." He wanted to say something, but I waved my hand to stop him. I pushed him out of the room. As soon as we went out, our friends surrounded us. "What kind of whispers were you two hiding in there? We're not even allowed to hear them." "Don't worry. We won't disturb you today. We'll have fun at the wedding. We'll leave after playing for a while longer." Everyone present was very polite and well behaved. Considering that he had just had surgery, everyone brought juice and light snacks. Someone asked Julian, "When you're fully recovered, let's go to Iceland to see the aurora together." Julian calmly agreed, no longer getting emotionally excited at the mention of a trip as he used to. That person then turned to me and said, "You come too. We'll arrange the air tickets for you. We'll definitely make sure you see the most beautiful aurora." Julian looked up at me and left the choice to me. Having been rejected twice in a row, Even I, with my thick skin, should know when to stop. I said, "You guys go and have fun." But Julian suddenly said, "Why don't we all go together? You're my sister after all." As soon as he said these words, everyone was stunned. A friend beside him patted his shoulder gently, saying, "That's not a good joke you're playing." More friends quickly tried to smooth things over, saying, "He's just regained his eyesight and his mind isn't clear yet. Sister-in-law, don't take it to heart." This remark was glossed over amidst the joking and laughing, but Julian remained silent throughout. The expression on my best friend's face when she saw me wearing the ring flashed across my memory. "Have you really thought this through? If he regains his eyesight, will he really choose you?" The questions I couldn't answer back then finally have an answer now. No, he won't. The atmosphere of the gathering remained harmonious. Amidst the soft music, everyone chatted about all sorts of things from the past. I lowered my head and started searching for travel guides about Iceland. They were chatting about the topic of going on a vacation in Iceland, and the consumption amounts that were in the hundreds of thousands made me feel extremely uncomfortable. At this moment, I truly understood what my best friend meant when she said, "You're not from the same world." I quietly got up, and immediately felt Julian's gaze following me. Back in the bedroom, I looked around. All the furniture and decorations were arranged by Julian's mother. I dialed the number of the woman who had tearfully thanked me 5 years ago. After hesitating for a moment, I said, "Auntie, that bank card." As if she had been waiting for a long time, she immediately replied, "There's 10 million in it. You can use it with confidence. You've been so hardworking taking care of Chihuahua these past few years." I softly replied with a "What why?" I simply packed a few pieces of my personal clothing and put them in my bag. Holding that bank card, I turned around and left. As I passed through the living room, someone asked me, "Sister-in-law, where are you going?" I didn't want to make the situation awkward, so I smiled and said, "I want to go downstairs to buy a cup of milk tea." They said they would order it as takeout. But I politely declined, saying, "The delivery fee is too expensive at this late hour." Julian seemed to sense something, and his gaze was fixed firmly on me. I waved to the people in the room and said, "I'm leaving now." At 1 o'clock in the morning, I left this place where I had lived for 5 years, taking that bank card with me. I guess it can be considered a proper ending. I found a temporary place to stay and settled down. I no longer had to constantly worry about his mood or be on tenterhooks that he might do something stupid. The sudden sense of relief actually made me feel unaccustomed. I stood on the balcony, gazing at the sparse starry sky. In the stillness of the night, I began to listen to the voice within my heart. I thought I would be in excruciating pain and would shed rivers of tears. But no, I just looked at my empty ring finger, wondering when I could forget the feeling of having once worn a ring there. That night, I just felt that the night breeze was slightly cool and the starlight was cold and distant. Julian called me in the early morning. After I answered, there was a long silence. Finally, I said, "Is there something wrong?" He hesitated and said, "Victoria, I want to drink the millet porridge you cook." After he went blind, he almost went on a hunger strike. I cooked various dishes in different ways, but he still refused to open his mouth. It wasn't until I pleaded with tears in my eyes, "Please take a sip. You can't go on like this." Perhaps he couldn't bear to see me cry, so he frowned and took a sip of the millet porridge. He didn't like the ones bought outside because I had managed to figure out the taste he liked. But everything that happened yesterday was still vivid in my mind, and his silence still echoed in my ears. I said calmly, "Julian, I've left." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Not knowing what else to say, I simply hung up. The number in the bank card shocked me. After double-checking it, I still felt it was unreal. When I carefully counted the zeros, I truly understood the chasm that lay between us. Indeed, my parents were just ordinary working-class people. They knew I was taking care of a blind boyfriend and came to visit on purpose. That day, Julian's mother took us to a 3-Michelin-starred restaurant. My parents were so nervous and at a loss that they didn't know what to do. After we got back, they said to me, "Daughter, this path isn't easy to walk." But they never interfered with me. They just said, if you want to give it a try, then go ahead. If it doesn't work out, you can always come back home. Now that I think about it, I finally see through the intention of Julian's mother. Those dishes that even Julian thought were luxurious were simply unthinkable for my parents who came from a small town. Behind Julian's mother's enthusiasm was a clear division of social classes. The gap in our lives was so obvious. I used that bank card to study abroad, and not a single zero was missing from it. Busy with handling the visa and arranging the itinerary, I met Julian again 3 years later in a coffee shop near the embassy. He was surrounded by his friends. Julian, if you don't chase Victoria back, I'll look down on you. Go and explain things clearly to her. She's the most suitable for you. We all think she's the one for you. Julian hadn't been out of the house for 5 years, and his skin was incredibly fair. Listening to his friends teasing, he gave a faint smile and said, if Victoria were to appear in front of me right now, I'd consider it. Coincidentally, I was sitting right behind them. I instinctively wanted to hide, but a friend had already called out my name. Victoria. She came running over enthusiastically and said, the tiramisu here is really great. The table where Julian was sitting fell silent instantly. I saw them looking in my direction. She brought the dessert in front of me. Seeing that I didn't look right, she asked, what's wrong? She looked at me worriedly. I suddenly realized that there was no need for me to let them affect my mood. I put on a smile and said, it's okay. Sit down. Thank you for remembering that I like desserts. This sentence started a conversation. Because we were so close, the conversation at Julian's table could be heard clearly. This is fate. Julian, you should apologize. Where can you find another sister-in-law as good as this? If you don't make things clear, we won't be friends anymore. Their voices were just as they used to be. They had all shown concern for Julian during his most difficult times. There was a girl among them who had always had a crush on Julian. When she walked into the hospital room to visit Julian, Julian deliberately splashed the warm water in his hand on her face. Her carefully done makeup was ruined instantly. Water droplets trickled down her cheeks and wet her collar. The girl stood there awkwardly. I quickly took out a tissue from the wardrobe and handed it to her. Julian looked at her coldly, with a sarcastic smile on his lips, saying, do you think you can chase me like this? The girl's eyes turned red. I quietly closed the door of the hospital room. When she came out, she held her head high and said to me, I won't like Julian anymore. He doesn't deserve it at all. After saying that, she turned around to leave, and the water droplets on her face were still dripping. When she reached the end of the corridor, she turned back. Looking at the tissues I was picking up from the floor, she said awkwardly, you're so kind. Thank you. You shouldn't be so good to him either. He doesn't deserve your sacrifice. After saying that, she left quickly. Later, we became good friends and would send each other gifts during festivals. Julian's friends were all very kind. I was lost in my memories when suddenly I heard a familiar voice beside me. Victoria. I raised my head instinctively and saw Julian standing there frowning, looking as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. His friends started to egg him on, saying, Julian, quickly apologize to sister-in-law and chase her back. Julian's frown deepened. But now I don't need his apology anymore. Love is supposed to be a mutual feeling. Moreover, the number in that bank card was enough to compensate for my 5 years of dedication. I couldn't be too greedy. Julian stood in front of me, hesitant to speak. Seeing his hesitant look, I took the initiative to say, there's no need to apologize. I don't need it. After hearing this, he obviously relaxed a bit. When he turned around, he stopped again and asked, when will you come home? Maybe I didn't make it clear enough last time, so this time I made it even more explicit. I'm not going back. Julian looked at me steadily, and finally gave a soft reply. He went back to his table, and his friends were still teasing him. How is it, did you chase her back? When will the wedding be held? We're waiting to attend the wedding banquet. I'm not getting married. Julian's tone was indifferent and impatient. The whole table fell silent instantly. Julian raised his voice, and there was anger in his voice. Why do you think I'll marry her? Does giving have to be rewarded with marriage? I've said it. I only regard her as my sister. This is the third time. I should also know when to stop. I stood up and said to his friends. The matter of getting married was a misunderstanding. I was just taking care of Julian in exchange for money. Julian looked up at me deeply, and I met his gaze without flinching. Looking at his gloomy expression, I said, we don't even have a familial relationship. Let's just be strangers. During the 5 years I took care of Julian, I often wondered if Mr. Darcy and Jane Austen's works would fall in love with Charlotte if he hadn't met Elizabeth. At first, I thought he would. Later, I thought he wouldn't. I kept wavering between yes and no, and I never found an answer to this question. I don't know how their story ended. But the answer for Julian and me is already very clear. Julian is in love now, and he's very high profile and flamboyant about it. He publicly announced it on his social media circle and generously introduced his girlfriend to all his friends. It's so obvious that it's hard for me to pretend not to know. I met Julian and his girlfriend at a birthday party. This unexpected encounter caught everyone off guard. When Julian walked in holding his girlfriend's hand, my friend beside me tightly grasped my hand. After all, they had witnessed how I took care of Julie and during those 5 years. I gave her a reassuring smile and calmly sized up the girl Julian had brought along. She was stunningly beautiful. Like a fairy who had stepped out of a painting. I couldn't help but look down at my simple attire and suddenly understood something. The moment our eyes met, he casually found a corner and sat down. As soon as he sat down, he called over a waiter and ordered a dessert. When the dessert was served, he placed it in front of the girl. The girl happily leaned over to his ear and whispered something. The girl shared her excitement with him enthusiastically. But he didn't even bother to lower his head. His gaze casually landed on the dessert, and he listened to the girl perfunctorily. Even an outsider could tell that he was distracted. If this was what he was like in a relationship, it was actually quite boring. I didn't feel sad. Instead, my friend had drunk too much. She grabbed me and said she wanted to introduce a boyfriend to me. I patiently tried to persuade her that she was drunk. When I was helping her up and about to leave, Julian's girlfriend stopped me. Sister, I know you. I stopped in my tracks, and she continued, thank you for taking care of Julian all these years. I nodded as a sign of acknowledgement and was about to help my friend leave. The girl was eager to prove something in front of me and didn't notice the suddenly frozen atmosphere around us. She hastily stood up and blocked my way. But if I had been by Julian's side at that time, I could have done it too. Those panic attacks in the dead of night, the glasses that were casually smashed, and those long sleepless nights. Could she really bear all that? I let out a soft laugh. Anyone could say such words. But there were no what-ifs in reality. However, who knows? Maybe Julian's eyes would have problems again, and she could try to take care of him then. Julian's face had already darkened. And my friend quickly stepped in to smooth things over. I also joked, if that really happens, it might be better to hire a professional nurse. Just with this sentence, Julian's anger erupted instantly. Bang! The wine glass hit the table heavily. And I turned my head to look. He impatiently interrupted me, let the past be the past. It's not interesting to talk about it. These words stunned me. He must have thought that that period of experience was too humiliating to even mention. The next day, when my best friend heard about this, she was so angry that she stomped her feet, saying, what does she mean? Is she trying to show off? I looked at the astonishing amount of compensation in my phone and suddenly felt an unusual calmness in my heart. Only then did I truly understand how powerful money could be. My best friend was convinced that I was just pretending to be okay and tried to persuade me again. Julian already has a new lover. Do you want me to introduce a boyfriend to you? With your conditions, you can find whatever kind of person you want. Nowadays, people all pursue flash marriages. But I prefer to take things slowly and hope to meet someone I can truly connect with and get to know. I politely declined, no, thanks. Seeing my refusal, my best friend was certain that I still couldn't let go of Julian. She cursed Julian. And I also smiled and chimed in a few words. Time passed slowly, and I learned photography and fell in love with traveling. During this period, there were also people who showed their affection for me. But as soon as I said I wanted to take things slowly and get to know each other better, they fled like they were avoiding the plague. Before long, I could see their posts showing off their love on social media. My best friend joked that I was the reincarnation of the matchmaker. I also laughed. During the 5 years I took care of Julian, I devoted all my attention to him. Now I want to focus on managing my own life first. I need to wait until my heart is completely empty before I can accept another person. I believe that I will eventually meet someone who is equally sincere and willing to gradually get close to my heart. Julian quickly had a new lover after his breakup. He publicly announced his new relationship, and the people around him gradually realized that it was all over between Julian and me. I went to the UK for further study and started a brand new life there. I hadn't been back to China for 3 years, but news about Julian always reached my ears. I heard that he was single again and seemed to have finally stopped his search. His friends began to hint that I should come back, saying that Julian had changed. As the Spring Festival was approaching, I had no choice but to return to China. Unexpectedly, as soon as I got off the plane, I saw a group of familiar faces. Julian's friends were all there and exclaimed, "Victoria, studying abroad has made you even more charming." They didn't distance themselves from me because of what had happened between Julian and me. One of my friends specifically sent me a message on the day Julian and I separated, saying, "Victoria, even without Julian, I still want to be your friend." But what surprised me the most was that Julian was also there. He stood outside the crowd, staring blankly into the distance. Finally, he was the first to speak. "Long time no see." His attitude was completely different from what it was 3 years ago. He actually greeted me like an old friend. I replied politely, "Long time no see." He hesitated and said, "My eyes." Before he could finish, my phone suddenly rang. I smiled apologetically and answered the phone. "Sister, where are you?" A clear male voice came from the receiver. His tone infected me, and I said, "I'll send you my location. Don't worry." After hanging up the phone, my friends had already decided on a place for the dinner gathering. After they finished speaking, I asked, "Can I bring someone along?" Everyone asked curiously, "Who is it?" A figure wearing the same beige coat as mine ran over from a distance, like a warm little sun. He directly took my hand and said, "Kokathaslai, I've missed you so much." His action was so quick that my friends were all stunned. I wanted to help him carry his luggage, but he firmly refused. I had no choice but to introduce him to my friends. "This is Ethan, my boyfriend." Fate is really amazing. It comes quietly when you least expect it. When Ethan confessed his love to me at first, I still said I wanted to take things slowly. I thought he would give up quickly like the others. But unexpectedly, he really accompanied me and took things step by step. Before I knew it, I found that his presence was everywhere in my life. At my age, when I say I want to take things slowly, many people think I'm being perfunctory. But this guy who is younger than me really accompanied me every step of the way. He is passionate and sincere. You've been hiding him so well. If it weren't for this time, we wouldn't have known. You have to treat us to a meal. Actually, it wasn't that I deliberately hit him. I also didn't expect that he would follow me back. That day, I missed my flight because of a traffic jam. When I was changing my ticket, I received a message from him looking aggrieved. "Why haven't you come yet? I'm so sad waiting for you." It turned out that he had bought the ticket next to mine to surprise me, but it ended up being a miss due to unforeseen circumstances. He had arrived at the airport early to wait for me, and we had just met. My friends were still teasing us, and I smiled and said, "This meal is on me." Ethan immediately raised his hand and shouted, "Let me treat you guys." He has an outgoing personality and quickly got along well with everyone. When we arrived at the restaurant, it turned out that with Ethan added, we just filled all the seats. At this moment, someone noticed that Julian was gone. They quickly dialed his phone. And Julian's voice sounded a bit weak. My eyes suddenly feel uncomfortable, so I came to the hospital. Everyone couldn't sit still immediately. "What's going on? What did the doctor say?" "It's okay. The doctor said I just need to rest. You guys can start eating first." Although Julian said so, everyone knew that his eye condition was not optimistic. Seeing the embarrassed expressions on everyone's faces, I took the initiative to defuse the situation and said, "You guys go and see Julian. We can reschedule this meal for another day. Ethan and I are also tired and want to go back and rest." Ethan was very understanding and didn't get upset because of this unexpected situation. He smiled and said goodbye to everyone. On the way home, he enthusiastically shared his experiences abroad with me. He could find interesting topics at every street corner. He was always like this, full of curiosity and a desire to explore the world, like a child who would never grow up. No one expected that when we got home, we would see Julian standing at the door. Ethan, who was holding my hand, paused for a moment. When he saw Julian approaching, he took the initiative to greet him, "Brother Julian." His tone was gentle, and he even called him brother on his own initiative. I couldn't help but take a look at him. Julian smiled at him but didn't respond. He looked at me and said, "Victoria." His gaze kept following me. "Long time no see." He repeated it again. Ethan wasn't annoyed even though he was ignored. He stood quietly beside me, still holding my hand. Julian opened his mouth, and I introduced him first. "This is my boyfriend, Ethan." Julian forced a stiff smile and said, "Okay." Then he said, "There might be something wrong with my eyes again." Ethan immediately showed his concern and said, "Then you should go to the hospital for a checkup right away." He took out his phone and asked seriously, "Do you want me to call you a car?" He added, "After all, my girlfriend isn't a doctor." Julian ignored him and called out again, "Victoria." Ethan turned to me and asked, "Sister, why isn't he paying attention to me?" How could I know why Julian was ignoring him? Julian called out again, "Victoria." Ethan leaned close to my ear and asked, "Sister, what's going on?" I pushed his head away and said, "I don't know." He leaned in again to ask. I habitually took out the key to open the door, only to remember that Julian was still there. Ethan didn't hide it at all and said, "Sister, brother Julian is still waiting." Julian's expression was a bit distorted. When he saw me looking at him, he said, "Can we have a talk?" Ethan shook my hand and said, "Sister, does he have something to talk to you about?" It was only then that I realized he had been deliberately pretending to be innocent from the very beginning. I followed his words and said, "There's nothing to talk about." After closing the door, Ethan immediately hugged me and said, "I'm jealous." I stroked his hair and said, "What are you jealous of?" When we got together, I told him everything about Julian. What else did he have to worry about? "I hate it when you're so slow-witted." Before I could respond, he laughed again and said, "But being slow-witted is actually quite nice." He buried his face in my shoulder and whispered, "You can't tell when others have feelings for you." But that night, Julian still called. "Victoria, do you know that your boyfriend has been on and off with his ex-girlfriend for 3 years?" Julian was indeed in the hospital, and his condition was unclear. The girlfriends who had once said they would take care of him all went to the hospital to visit him. His friends even made bets on how long they would last. The result was 2 days. Most of them left within a few hours. The people around me all said that he deserved it and repeatedly reminded me not to be soft-hearted. How could I be soft-hearted? Since the day I received that compensation, I had never thought of turning back. Late at night, Julian's mother suddenly sent me a message, saying, "Victoria, could you please meet Julian once?" When I received the message, Ethan was by my side. I directly refused and said, "Sorry, my boyfriend will mind." She called and begged me desperately. "I'll pay you whatever you want." Julian refuses to eat a single bite of food. How could this happen? How could this happen? She was incoherent and her voice was choked with sobs. From her fragmented words, I guessed that Julian's eye condition was not optimistic. Julian's mother cried and said, "Why did it have to be our Julian? Please help me. Something bad will happen to him if he continues like this." Ethan listened beside me and said understandably, "It's okay to meet him once. I won't think too much about it." But it was already meaningless. Why did I have to meet him? And once I agreed, they would take advantage of the situation and ask for more. I insisted to the hysterical woman, I'm sorry, we've already settled our scores. I'm living a good life now, and Julian should also move on. The next day, I learned from a friend that Julian had developed complications with his eyes, and the doctor said there was a small probability that he would go blind again. It was so hard for him to regain his eyesight, and now he had to face the darkness again. It was difficult for him to accept this blow. I chose to ignore the messages she sent, but Julian suddenly called. I thought he was calling to ask me which hospital I went to for a follow-up checkup recently. But he said, Victoria, how far do you think you and that young boyfriend of yours can go? I didn't say anything, and he continued. Do you want to make a bet? What are we betting on? On his sincerity. I sneered. Such a test would only destroy the foundation of our relationship. I'm not interested in this boring game. But he seemed to have expected my answer. Just wait and see. All men are the same at their core. I put this baffling phone call out of my mind. There were so many things to deal with at the end of the year. Ethan asked me out several times to go shopping and visit exhibitions, but I turned him down. He was like a deserted puppy, with his head drooping all day long. It was only when he realized that I was really busy that he started to find things to do on his own. He had an outgoing personality and quickly made new friends. He would leave the house early every morning. Sometimes I would run into him when I woke up, and more often I would just see a note left on the dining table. Gradually, a sense of unease spread in my heart. Where had he been? Who was he with? I remembered that when I was on a business trip for a week, he would always chatter on about what I was doing. Now I finally understood how he felt at that time. I wanted to find a time to have a good talk with him, but before I could open my mouth, Julian sent me a photo with a new number. In the photo, Ethan was chatting and laughing with a girl in a coffee shop. My heart sank. He had told me that he was going to meet an old classmate. Julian's messages kept coming. See? What did I tell you? Do you think he'll come home tonight? I blocked him, but I couldn't help sending a message to Ethan. What are you doing? He replied instantly. I'm having dinner with a friend. I hesitated for a long time and in the end, I still didn't ask him when he would be back. Probably around 10 o'clock, he volunteered. Then I would wait until 10 o'clock. Time passed by minute, and I paced restlessly in the living room. It was 11 o'clock, and Ethan still hadn't come back, nor had he sent any messages. Julian called again with a different number. Do you believe it now? All men are the same. I suddenly thought it was ridiculous. Even if he really betrayed me, so what? I can just start over. I would never be afraid to love again just because I had been hurt. When that girl who used to like Julian said that he didn't deserve me, I didn't take it seriously. I thought he was so excellent, how could he not deserve me? Now when I look back on those 5 years of taking care of him, he was negative and decadent. He clearly had the best treatment conditions, but refused to try. Now he even wants to drag me down with him. She was right. I had misjudged him. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I was still waiting. But why was I waiting? Why was I influenced by Julian's words instead of just asking him directly? Why did I let a third person interfere in our relationship? I put on my coat and went downstairs. As soon as I got downstairs, I saw Ethan getting out of a car, and the woman in the photo was still sitting in the back seat. When he saw me, he was obviously flustered and said, Victoria, I'm a bit late coming back. The woman in the car also noticed me and waved at me friendly. Before the car started, I stopped it. The driver honked the horn impatiently. And I knocked on the car window. The woman rolled down the window, revealing her delicate makeup, and said, Is there something wrong? I looked into her eyes and said, You used to date, right? She quickly explained. Don't get me wrong. I'm just on a business trip here. I interrupted her, Please answer my question. Ethan eagerly explained, There was a traffic jam on the way. It was supposed to be 10 o'clock, but it was 1 o'clock in the morning. What kind of magical traffic jam was that? I said firmly, Tell me the truth. Yes, during our relationship, Ethan had never mentioned this past. Some people might not care, but I cared a lot. I turned around and walked away. The woman quickly got out of the car and explained. It was really just a chance encounter. He said he was traveling here, so we had a meal together. Nothing happened. You can check the surveillance cameras if you don't believe me. She kept explaining more and more until Ethan interrupted her sharply. That's enough. She stood there stunned, and Ethan said, "You can go now." After watching her leave, he stopped me from going upstairs and said, "We need to talk." I looked up at him and said, "There's nothing to talk about. Honesty is the most important thing in a relationship." I told him everything. But he went on a date with his first love behind my back. I'm not a fool. I just chose to play dumb because I liked him. I didn't want to talk much to other people, and I didn't want to respond to their kindness either. I pretended not to see all the signs of affection and closed myself off. In that case, let's break up. This relationship started quickly and ended just as quickly. My friends invited me to go out and play and asked me to bring Ethan along. I directly said, "We broke up." My friends felt sorry for me and said they would introduce a boyfriend to me. But I still refused. I still believe in sincere love. If I can't meet the right person, it's also fine to be alone. Julian's mother still kept calling me, begging me to go and see him. I never gave in. I sent her the nutritional recipes and medication suggestions I had sorted out before and booked a flight back to my hometown. This time, I finally caught the flight. As soon as I sat down, I found that Ethan was also on the plane. He smiled at me and said, "Sister, this time we didn't miss each other." But he didn't even want to understand why I was angry. He just thought about how to coax me to get back together. "I'm sorry. Let's start over, okay? Can you forgive me? Let's not be like this anymore." He repeated these words over and over again. When he was chasing me, I would think about his messages over and over again. Now he didn't even want to give me a reasonable explanation. What's more, I refused Julian's mother's desperate plea for me to see him. I really couldn't figure out why he had to meet his first love so badly. "Don't say anything more. Let's just end it like this." I got off the plane, and he was still standing there. When I looked back while taking a taxi, he had already left. The passionate young man couldn't hold his patience after all. But it doesn't matter. At least I experienced his enthusiasm. I will still welcome the next relationship with anticipation.